Good morning and welcome to our webinar about how to measure circular economy from AFRY. And in the next hour, we will talk about what is the circular economy. And really quickly, because we think that you already probably know what the circular economy is, then we will talk about the importance of measuring circular economy, relevant policies. Then we will explain a few different tools regarding how to measure circular economy. And then in the end, we will explain what is AFRY's approach to measure circular economy. In the end, we will answer questions. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please write them into the Teams chat box and we will discuss and answer the questions in the end. We are recording this webinar and we also are going to have some interactive questions during the webinar with the website Mentimeter, and we will show you instructions later on, but just keep your phones ready so that you know when to that you can answer the questions. So our panel today is we are three experts about the circular economy. My name is Saskia Görres and my background is sustainability and product design and mechanical engineering. I managed a startup creating circular economy products. So my specialty is circular economy design and circular economy business operations.
Yes, and my name is Carolina Togard, also a sustainability consultant, and I have done research in circular economy related policies, created circular packaging strategies for large companies. I was part of an expert group for the Swedish delegation of circular economy to give recommendations to the government about measuring circularity. A lot of fun. And I've also worked with circular business models and resource management.
Yes, and my name is Minna Pirilä. I am working as an account manager for industrial circular economy services here at AFRY Finland. I have worked my whole career for over 15 years related to circular economy, starting from the utilization of industrial byproducts already during my chemistry studies, and continuing that in my doctoral thesis and in the research work after that. And during the last 4 years, I have been a consultant and I have widened my perspective to cover the whole industrial value chains and more strategic issues. But now let's get started for the topic of today. First, I wanted to bring out the challenge why circular economy is needed. Overconsumption and depletion of natural resources is one big challenge, and as we know that we are already consuming too much. For example, if everyone would consume as much as the Finnish people, we would need actually 4 times more of natural resources than we have globally. And these increasing consumption leads to increasing waste volumes as well. So the waste generation is also expected to increase by 70% in the next 30 years. And we are already producing a lot of waste, as in Europe, for example, we are producing 2.5 billion tons per year, which makes 5 tons per person, which is a lot. And in addition to the waste generation and consumption, also the greenhouse gas emissions and biodiversity loss and water stress are big issues, and those are mainly due to the extraction and processing of resources. So we need to change the way how we are designing processes and products, and circular economy is one way for that. But before going further, we would like to ask you a question. What do you associate with circular economy? So please go to menti.com, and Saskia, please, you can share the question.
Yeah, so if you go to menti.com and then type in the link at the number 92549616, then you should see this question, and then you can start writing a few words that you associate with the circular economy.
Okay, this is interesting. Recycling is there in the middle, and the bigger the word is, the more answers have been the same word. But now there are no more changes. Maybe some changes are still coming, but so there are recycling, no waste, waste management, industrial ecosystems, reversed supply chains, zero waste, utilizing waste heat. Good questions. Now I will start sharing my presentation again from here. Good. So there were a lot of answers that said recycling. Well, that is one thing that I wanted here, why I wanted this picture here, to show you that a circular economy is not only about recycling. If it would be only about recycling, we would only have like a couple of loops there, and we would still have quite a lot of waste. But in circular economy, we are using all the different circular business models to keep the materials in use for as long as possible with as high value as possible. And in that case, we would not create waste. These business models include, for example, using services, sharing, leasing, renting, swapping, and so on. There is actually a lot of definitions for circular economy, which makes it extra difficult to measure. And however, all these definitions are based on 3 principles for circular economy, which are design out waste and pollution, keep the products and materials in use, and regenerate natural systems. And all these principles of circular economy, they are bringing benefits for the environment, for our nature, for the natural resources. But in addition to the environmental benefits, they are giving benefits also for businesses, for companies, and we wanted here to show a couple of those, what kind of benefits they could bring. So, for example, financial benefit is always the key in business. So circular economy encourages cross-sector collaboration and gives access to new partnerships that can grow networks and lead to new opportunities and win-win situations. Also, circular economy gives positive image for the company. It helps in marketing and branding and communication with stakeholders. And of course, that gives also competitiveness. And for example, according to the World Economic Forum, a startup that aims for positive social impact alongside the financial profit has 43% more potential to succeed in the market than a traditional startup. So the image is a key for the success as well. And also the circular economy strategies and a positive image can attract talent. So the businesses and companies get experts that value also the circular economy and the business strategy that the company has. Also, customer loyalty is one big issue that can come alongside with the circular economy, since the circular economy offers a new way for looking at the relationships between markets, customers, and resources. And also people are shifting to access instead of ownerships. And in that way, for example, clothes rental companies and other things that are using the circular business models are gaining more market share. And nowadays also digitalization is helping to engage with customers after the sales phase. And last but not least, circular economy helps to achieve the climate targets and carbon neutrality, since we need to tackle the climate change and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and circular economy is one key solution for this. And circular economy can, for example, cut the greenhouse gas emissions by eliminating waste and pollutions, so the emissions associated with the production of the materials that go to waste can be reduced. Also, the carbon can be stored and retained in the soil by regenerating natural systems, which is one of the basic principles of circular economy. Also, circular economy gives tools for continuous improvement towards the company's sustainable future, and applying circular economy principles can link with wider business objectives and help to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. But here was a short introduction to circular economy and the benefits. And next, I'm giving the floor to Carolina. Please.
Thank you, Minna. Yes, so why is it important then to measure circularity? One example is that it's important to follow up policies and to assess what policies are necessary to implement. It's also good for benchmarking, to compare products, companies with each other, and also to learn from each other. It's important for tracking of improvement on a micro and macro level. And circular economy is, like Minna said, key to achieve the climate goals and must therefore also be measured. And it's also a way to decide what actions to be prioritized, and also what I think a way to prioritize circularity, since what gets measured gets done. And there are many circular initiatives on this topic, and here are some examples that are on an EU level, national level, and that impacts many companies, like the ISO standard. So the EU taxonomy is being developed to reach the objectives of the European Green Deal. And it's a classification system of environmentally sustainable economic activities, and it's an important enabler to scale the sustainable investment. So the first delegated act on sustainable activities for climate change was approved recently now in April. And the delegated act on the transition to a circular economy will be presented Q4. And I've heard that there is like 46,000 comments on that one right now. So there's a lot of work going on. And that one will present what companies must work with and consequently measure regarding a circular economy. And then we also have the ISO standard that is also under development, and there is a group looking at how to measure circular economy. And in 2018, the European Commission launched a monitoring framework for circular economy to measure circularity in European countries. However, the indicators, they mostly focus on material recycling and waste management. So one of the objectives in the latest EU action plan for circular economy is now to include more aspects of circular economy into the framework. And the national level, so that's there's an example of Sweden then. So the expert group gave many recommendations to the delegation of circular economy in Sweden, and the delegation then presented some of them to the government. And a few examples are compile examples of metrics for circular procurement, as well as develop guidelines for using the metrics. And that is something that is ongoing now. Another recommendation was to produce new type of data and statistics to measure circular economy, and also to actively contribute to the work going on at the EU level and also with the ISO standard. So that is also something that is we are looking on now. And now we have a new exercise, another exercise with the Mentimeter. So how circular is this one? I'm sure that many of you recognize it. It's the IKEA bag. It's made of 60% recycled polypropylene, 40% virgin polypropylene. It's very durable. Yeah, I'm sure that many of you have carried it around. So, well, pretty circular. Yeah, so more circular than not, at least. Yes, and that's great. Polypropylene is recyclable, so this bag is recyclable. However, it's nothing that IKEA takes back or so they rely on the consumer behaviors of consumers and also the systems in different countries. So we don't really know what happens with the bag afterwards. But since it's durable, then you preserve the value for a very long time. But when it's recycled, since the color is a bit dark, then the recycled material has less value than if the bag was lighter. So there are many different things to think about. So the next exercise is how circular you think that these cutleries are. So they are from Ecovita, and they are made of corn-based plastics. And they say that they are compostable. They are compostable in industrial composting facilities, and they cannot be recycled. Yeah, so less circular here. Yes, so this one is a bit of a tricky one, since these industrial composting facilities, there are not, I mean, like in Sweden, there are none of those. So in Sweden, we could not put them in these recycling composting facilities. So they would probably just be incinerated. So then we would lose all the value from these cutleries. And there's also a risk, since it's branded compostable. People might think that, then I can throw them in the garden, and that's not the intention. And since they cannot be recycled either, then if they would be recyclable, then you would preserve more of the value and circulate it more times. So yeah, I agree with your rating. And this is the last example. So it's a wall built with the PET bottles. So how circular is that then? Not so high points. Well, I think that the energy used for doing this wall, it's probably much lower than if bricks were being used. However, the cycle for PET bottles are here broken, because they won't be recycled probably again. They will be in that wall for some time, but they will degrade. So we're not really sure for how long they will be used. yeah, so there are many things to take into account, and looking at the whole value chain and like the whole from a holistic perspective, then, well, it's not so obvious how circular things are. So now I'll go back to the presentation. So why is it difficult or challenging, at least, to measure circularity in businesses and so? So at this point, there is no standardized metrics yet to measure the performance of businesses. Oh, did I automatically? There. Well, in their circular transition. And there are many things that you can measure. You can measure, and on different levels, you can measure how circular a company is as a whole. You can measure circularity to reach a certain effect, such as reduced climate effects. You can measure the performances and different operations on like a molecule component, a product level, and those cycles. You can also measure the enablers of the circular transition, such as strategies, culture in the company, development of skills. So there are different things to measure in different parts of the company, and the targets might vary as well. And some companies, they have set an overall climate target and measures circular economy as a mean to reach that target. However, many companies feel that it's much easier to measure and put goals on climate rather than circular economy, which is understandable. Another example is Husqvarna in Sweden, who has set a goal that is launching 50 circular innovations before 2025. So that is their way of measuring circularity, or one of their ways at least. And they just aim to become 100% circular, and defines what that is and how to measure it along the way. So for now, so every company can actually choose their own way of to measure, and there are different tools. However, soon each company might need to report on the same type of data, except, for example, now when the EU taxonomy for circular economy is being launched. So then we will have something uniform to measure as well. So there is a lot of methods and tools for measuring. So one example here is a circular assessment that was developed by Circular Economy in the Netherlands. So it's designed to give organizations a simple way to diagnose how current practices match up to their circular objectives. So it's an online self-assessment tool, and its main purpose is to raise awareness. So it scores on the current circular thinking at the companies, as well as educates also employees on potential circular opportunities to explore further. So it's a simple tool to use just to start with, which is great. And the CTI tool that was developed by the WBCSD is also a self-assessment tool for companies to help them understand to what degree they are closing the loops and optimizing material flows and creating value from their resources. So it creates awareness, sets a baseline for what should be changed, supports and to prioritize certain actions, and establishing targets and monitoring progress. But so the focus for that tool is on products and materials. And let's see if I managed to click. We have Circulytics, developed by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and that one goes beyond assessing products and materials, and assesses more on a company level, and shows to what extent a company has reached its circularity across the entire operations. So it has indicators for desired performances in each operation, like recycled material, circular product design, water flows, and it has indicators for what is needed to enable the performances, like we talked earlier, such as strategy, planning, people skills. And then on a product level, we have the repairability index regulation that came into force in France this year. So it aims to achieve a 60% repair rate of electrical and electronic products within 5 years. And the regulation will most likely be adopted at EU level, and France sees it as the first step to a sustainability index. So as you've heard, well, there's a lot of focus on circulating materials in these tools, and also when we talk about what is circular economy and how to measure it, and then it's much focus on weight and volumes, but I think that it's very important also to measure preserved value of products and materials, since it's a key component of circular economy. And it's also important to measure the circularity of business models, since they enable circular material flows and value preservation. And another thing is that metrics that can be used then to measure companies' transition towards business models are often confused with sustainability metrics. So the goal that we all are aiming for is sustainability, sustainable development. So therefore, it's very relevant for businesses not to only measure its performance in the transition to a circular economy, but also adopt sustainability metrics to measure the impact of circular initiatives. And a recent study from Citra, where well, a lot of companies had been interviewed, showed that many companies are a bit confused and not really aware of the environmental and especially the social impacts of their circular business models and initiatives. So that is something that we really need to improve. And some of the tools for doing that assessment is, well, you could use the Sustainable Development Goals. That gives you like a really holistic perspective and then deep dive in those. And another great tool is life cycle assessment, also to assess the environmental performance in each step of a product or process life cycle. And tools for that are, for example, CIMA-Pro and Gabi as well. So yeah, and we have got requests from from customers on how to measure circularity, and we didn't when we looked into. Oh, sorry, I stopped sharing. When we looked into these tools, then we couldn't really find one that was corresponding to the needs of our clients. So we took inspiration of these tools and developed another, well, one for AFRY, which Saskia will present.
Yeah. So how Carolina already said, we had a look at a lot of different circular economy measuring tools, but we felt that a lot of them just focused on just purely the material streams, or they were quite very time intensive, like the life cycle assessment, where you need to have like a very specific problem and you can't really look at the company at a kind of first whole glance. So we kind of felt, what is the best way to help our clients to have a first broad look, but then also in the end have actions. So what can you do to become more circular? So this is our process. So we would start off with the initiation of a roadmap, do the circular economy screening, which is the kind of overall quick overall view about the circular economy. Then we identify measures. Then we set our targets. Then we have indicators towards these targets, and then we do our action plan implementation. And then in the end, obviously, the monitoring. We've been talking about measuring the whole time, so we will have to measure throughout the process as well. Here in this webinar, I'm going to focus on the topics of circular economy, the identified measures, how do we find them, or like how we find them for the companies, and then how we set our targets. So, did I share with sound now? Oops. Yeah, so we've got a little video for you that explains our process just really quickly. So here you go.
The topic of circular economy
has gained in importance in recent years, and with the introduction of the EU taxonomy, it is now a clear environmental goal for every company. However, the circularity of a company, product or service is difficult to measure because the boundary conditions are not clearly defined and systems overlap. AFRY has therefore developed a circular economy screening that does not compare companies with each other, but companies with their own circular potential. We have identified hundreds of specific circular economy measures in these business areas in order to make your company more circular. During an interactive online workshop, your team can assess the circular economy measures and discuss them with our circular economy experts. Using a filter method, we identify the circular measures with the highest implementation potential and the highest environmental impact. These specific improvement opportunities are then used to create a circular economy action plan with you. Yeah, so overall, this was like a quick overview, but I'm going to explain it a bit more in detail. The main concept of our circular economy screening is that we don't try to compare companies with each other, because we tried that and found it very difficult, because every company has got their own boundary conditions, they've got their own like machines, like even if you compare companies in the same sector, it's very, very difficult to come to a like sound and scientific conclusion about the comparison. So what we think makes more sense is to compare your company with the potential that you could have regarding a circular economy. So we look at the different business areas, and we defined, we found 9 business areas that are relevant for the circular economy. So the first one is obviously resources. Then we have energy. So that would be, can you, be more energy efficient. Then it's water efficiency, which is also really relevant for a lot of our clients. And staff, that would be, can the staff like be more educated about the circular economy? Can they contribute to be more circular in the company, but also maybe outside in their own time? We then look into transport. Then packaging is very important as well, because it's very resource based as well. Then buildings, so that would be about energy efficiency in buildings, or which resources are being used in the buildings. And then machines, can you have machines that are easily updated, easily repaired, or where you can process, like change the processes really quickly. And then in the end, it's land use. That's maybe not relevant for every company, but there's a lot of companies where land use is quite an important question as well, if we talk about circular economy. So each of these business areas we scan with 3 objectives in mind. So that would be circularity, maximized utilization, and value preservation. So circularity we define as circular inputs and circular outputs. So how much of the materials that come into the company are either renewable or recycled already. And then on the other side, what of the materials that goes out is recycled, or can you reuse it in a different way, or can you give it to another industry sector. So we try to increase the material circularity. Then maximized utilization is about how can we use the resources that we have the most. So that would be, for example, resource efficiency, so that we use less material, but we have the same amount of quality. Or we use sharing concepts or service concepts. So where, for example, one car is used by several people, and that would be defined as maximized utilization as well. And then what Carolina already mentioned beforehand, what we think is maybe the most important one is value preservation. So that's where we try, when we have a product, that we can reuse it, we can remanufacture components of it, and we can recycle the resources in the end. So we try to keep the value of the product as long as possible. Yeah, so we've got our business areas and we scan them with these objectives. And for example, like this is just an example of what we would do. So we would look at the resources as a first step. We have our circularity, maximize utilization and longevity. And in each of these objectives, we've got about 20 different measures. And then we go through them with you in a workshop or an online workshop. And we ask you, is this measure, has this already been implemented? Is the implementation possible? Has it been partly implemented? Has it already been implemented? Or is it not relevant at all? So we go through each of these measures quite quickly to be able to scan the whole business. So we start off with about 100 different measures, and then we try to kind of, with this really quick screening, to kind of cut it down to about 30 or 40 measures where we say this is relevant for your company. And so this helps us to do some benchmarking, to kind of show, like, to see where are we just now in the company. And so we would have our different business sectors or business areas, and then we can see where do we have already measures that are already implemented, measures that have been partly implemented, or measures that are relevant but haven't been implemented. And this is a really good overview to see where are we already doing really well, and where do we have a lot of potential to grow, and where are the areas where we don't have that much potential, that are just not as relevant. For example, like land use, that maybe is not relevant for quite a lot of companies. So the next step would be then, after the benchmarking, where we see where are we now, to like really clearly define what can we do to go forwards. And for that is like what I already said, we have about 100 different measures. We do this evaluation of relevance. We go down to about 30 different measures, and we do our benchmarking and then see how many of these relevant measures have already been implemented. And then we say, well, okay, here, for example, we have 17 measures that haven't been implemented. We then sit down with our sector experts and with you to really clearly define how do we make a measure, like an overall measure, into a specific improvement opportunity for your company. So this works like this, so that we, for example, have the relevant measure would be called utilization of renewable materials as an alternative to virgin materials. So, for example, in a building or construction sector, we would say, well, could you here utilize wood as a construction material? And we did that with a project in Sweden. Then another one, for example, we have the relevant measure that would be called separate waste collection on site. So the specific improvement opportunity for the client, which was a client who did sport equipment, was, well, could you separate your waste, your plastic offcuts in like different colors, so that it's then easier to reuse this, like the plastic offcuts in your own production. Then, for example, a return scheme for products would be then, the specific side of it would be that we say, can you, this was a project we did with H&M, can you return the online packaging of the textiles, or can you like return the textiles together? Resource efficiency, we did a project with the food industry where we talked a lot about how can you reduce water consumption and increase the water circulation in the plant and the food industry. And yeah, so like you'd kind of get a feeling that like we kind of talk with the client and the sector experts to make these overall goals more specific and really clear to see is like, what can you do? Minimization of permanent fixings. That was a project where we designed a modular sofa so that you don't use any glues, staples or nails, but you only use screws, so that you can you can update components like the armrest, backrests or the legs. Then reuse waste streams in different sectors. We are working a lot with the pulp industry in AFRY, and we there kind of discovered or looked into a way, how can you recover and reuse potassium and phosphorus. So, but overall, these examples are just to show you that each of these relevant measures can be translated into a specific improvement opportunity for your company. And then when we have our specific improvement opportunities, we know, okay, here we say we are collecting this plastic separately and this color separately, we can assess it for the environmental impact, the operational impact, and the financial impact, like the implementation. So we can calculate how much CO2 would you save by applying the circular economy measure. Would it change the operational structure of your company a lot or not? Is it easy to implement or not? And then obviously the financial impact is like how much would you have to invest or how much profit could you make afterwards, because you're actually saving resources, and the circular economy is actually a financial benefit for every company. Yeah. So in the end, we would have a table where we see our measures that we identified as relevant. We see which company, like what's is this measure, has this been implemented, not implemented, partly implemented, the degree of the implementation, the improvement opportunities, and then each of the improvement opportunities that we thought are interesting will have a summary sheet with the financial impact, the environmental impact, and the operational impact. And then we go towards targets. So we can look at our different measures that we now chosen, and it was really important for us when we did the process that we don't just chuck them all together, like the environmental impact, the operational impact, and the financial impact, and make one number of like, okay, this is a number 1 or a number 2, because we think it's really important that you, for your, like in your company, choose, do you want to like maybe do a measure that has a low environmental impact, but it's really easy to implement, or do you want to do one that has a really high environmental impact, but it maybe will take a bit more effort to implement it? And both of these measures are really important to kind of reach the circular economy. So for the targets, we say we go back to our benchmarking and then say, how many measures do you want to do in 5 years? So we say in resources, in a moment, we've implemented 3 measures here, and in 5 years we want to have 9 implemented, and the rest that we're like in the process of implementing. And you can do this for like a 1-year basis, 2-year basis, so that you really kind of see the process for the next 5 or 10 years. So this would be the targets, and then like each of the measures will have to sit down and like define indicators. So how much percent do you want to collect separately? How much percent of the material of the input flows should be recycled or from renewable flows? So it needs to be measurable, and that's our indicators. And then we move with our measures and our indicators towards our action plan, where we then say, okay, which of the measures do we target first? What's our kind of timeline? We often feel like that design, if we have design measures, that we do them in the beginning, because obviously everything else follows. And then maybe operational changes have to like be phased, like have to be really slowly introduced, because they're sometimes a bit tricky. So this is where we kind of like see, okay, we have the measures now that we want to do, but how do we structure them in the best way that it makes sense to implement them? And then obviously the most important part, so that we don't just measure and talk, but we actually take action and implement the circular economy, is the implementation, where we have our measures, we know whose responsibility, we have our deadlines, we have our indicators, and then hopefully the implementation goes well. And then obviously the monitoring is extremely important, so that we constantly can look back. It's like, how are we doing? How many measures have we introduced? And do we have to change anything? Do we have to adapt? So this is our AFRY's process, and we've been doing it with a few companies, and we had some really interesting results. So the summary of our whole webinar is that circular economy is crucial for reaching our climate goals. Circular economy is a tool for sustainability. It's not a separate thing. It is crucial for saving carbon emissions, because we are avoiding the new production of products. Measuring circular economy is essential for policies and monitoring. Without measuring anything, we can't really have very strict policies or regulations, because you can't measure it or quantify the impact. We don't want to just measure volumes or like material volumes, but we also want to measure value, and that's where it becomes tricky. And measuring circular economy is difficult because there are no boundary conditions, which we try to explain, but it's quite like boundary conditions overlap. Like, do you include this factor? Do you not include this factor? So it suddenly becomes really, really tricky to compare and measure. Our tool is like kind of covers every business area, and we think that we want to measure first and then concentrate on concrete actions for improvement. That we always focus on what can we do, what can get done. And yeah, we really like the quote of what is measured gets done, because without having indicators or being able to quantify anything, often things don't get done. Yeah, so if you have any questions, I would like you to maybe go to Mentimeter again, and you can write down there any thoughts if you have any questions. But most importantly, we would be really interested in your thoughts about what do you think is the biggest barrier or the biggest problem about measuring circular economy, especially now that you've heard what we've talked about. Yeah, how long does the screening take? So the workshop itself is about like we do 2 sessions of 2 hours where we kind of scan the different business areas, and then the like the follow-up, kind of how we identify measures, takes it depends on the company and how many measures you kind of want to analyze further. But like the online workshop or the workshop takes like 2 times 2 hours. Do we have any questions in our... don't know, Carolina, do you want to answer this question? How do you view social aspects within the circular economy?
Yes, it can be about making products more accessible for people that have a lower income, for example. And it can also be like, by this business model, we give more jobs to people that are, now I'm just the English words, that are like vulnerable groups. So it's like you can think about how the social and you can think about how the aspects are impacted in the same way, like if it would be a linear business model also, but also what circular economy enables. So it's like, for example, this with access to products, and also with a sharing platform, you also increase this sense of a community, and you make people meet each other. And so there are many nice social things that you can.
Yeah, I really like the difficult to find the appropriate detail level, because I think we really struggled with that as well, because it's like, well, do you go really holistically and like you can cover a broad part, like parts of the company, or do you go really into detail and you do a life cycle assessment where you then actually can say, well, this is proper scientific and we know what we're talking about when we talk about like the proper numbers of material flows.
Yeah, and implementation costs, that is also common cost calculations that you do, and which the same methods are applied to circular business models as well. And with the contradictional goals, yeah, depends on what goals. So and that is pretty common. Like maybe you want to use a specific recycled material, but recycling that material requires a lot of energy. So then you have contradicting goals there. So then you need to decide what to prioritize, what aspects that are most important for you as a company, and maybe you will choose a material that is maybe less circular or less sustainable in other aspects for now, until there is a right technology to recycle those materials that you really want to have.
I also really like to comment about finding values to measure is the biggest challenge, because this is why most of the tools are focusing on material streams and recycling streams, because it is something you can quantify and measure. Whereas how do you measure that things are circulating, and how do you measure that the value is preserved? So that is one of the tricky parts. But I think that with us, when we focus on measures that are being implemented for the circular economy, that is one way for us to measure it. Yeah. So if you don't have any more questions, I think we would then say thank you very much. Thank you for participating with the Mentimeter. It was really fun to see what you think about the different products we chose, and also your kind of first view about the circular economy. And we have our contact details here. We will share the contact details after this webinar per email again, and we will also share the recording and the slides. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.